I paid 75% of the rent for my best friend, but she brought her homeless boyfriend to take over our place, then falsely accused me of being a threat. My name is Eric Sanderson, and I never imagined that a 3-year friendship would shatter into pieces in our second shared apartment, all because of a stranger. For 2 months, I endured the agony of feeling like an outsider in my own home, even though I was the one covering most of the costs. It all started 3 years ago, when I moved to this unfamiliar city. Fresh off quitting my job back home, I arrived with nothing but savings and courage, only to fall victim to a rental scam on my first day. My luggage was stuck at the station, and my phone was down to 3% battery. Stranded and alone, I stood on the street, helpless, until Leora showed up. We'd barely spoken in college, but when she saw my plea on social media, she didn't hesitate. She drove to pick me up, took me to her small apartment, and cleared out her spare bedroom for me. She helped me find a new place, went over every line of the rental contract to keep me from getting scammed again, and even accompanied me to sign the lease. When I struggled to find a job, she used her connections to get me interviews, stayed up late revising my resume, and practiced mock interviews with me. On weekends, she took me to friend gatherings, patiently showed me around the city's streets and affordable restaurants, and even taught me how to navigate the complicated bus system. Back then, she was like an older sister, giving me real warmth and support when I was at my most lost. Out of gratitude, and because she worked as a part-time florist with an unstable income, I volunteered to cover 70% of the rent and all the utility bills in our first shared apartment. We'd stay up late watching old movies on the couch, share the ups and downs of work, and go grocery shopping together to experiment with new recipes. She always said, "Eric, we're like family," and I truly believed this friendship, forged through hard times, would last a lifetime. This past summer, we decided to upgrade to a bigger, nicer apartment, renting directly from the owner with both our names on the lease. To help Leora move in smoothly, I paid the entire $6,000 security deposit and moving fees up front. For monthly expenses, utilities, property fees, and more, I still covered 75%. It didn't feel like a big deal at the time. After 3 years of friendship, helping each other out felt natural. But I never could have guessed that this apartment I'd been so excited about would become the start of my worst nightmare. Shortly after we moved in, a sudden tragedy shattered Leora. Her 8-year-old dog, Marshmallow, a white Bichon Frise she'd had since college, was hit by a speeding car while they were out walking and didn't survive. That dog was more than a pet to her. She'd always said, "Marshmallow is my closest family." She'd bought him custom treats, seasonal clothes, and even turned down a chance to study in New York to care for him when he was sick. After losing him, Leora changed completely. She locked herself in her room crying for 3 straight days, then turned to alcohol. Beer cans and wine bottles piled up on her nightstand, and around the living room, she'd often pass out drunk, vomiting all over the floor. Her temper became explosive. She'd fly off the handle over the smallest things, screaming profanities. Once, when I accidentally knocked over her mug, she yelled at me, "Did you do that on purpose? Are you trying to destroy the last thing I have left?" The kind, gentle girl who couldn't bear to step on an ant was gone, replaced by someone strange and cruel. We barely spoke anymore, falling into a cold war, living under the same roof, but might as well have been strangers. Just when I thought the Cold War would drag on, a stranger arrived and shattered the fragile peace. A month earlier, Leora had met a man named Trevor at a bar. I knew nothing about him, but every time we crossed paths, he left a terrible impression. He was huge, around 6 feet 4 inches, overweight, with unshaven stubble and a rank smell of cheap cigarettes mixed with sweat. His eyes were cloudy, and there was something off about him that made my skin crawl. 2 weeks later, Leora got arrested for drunk driving, and Trevor bailed her out. After that, he started showing up at our apartment uninvited, staying for hours on end. He'd take over the living room couch, prop his feet up on the coffee table, and throw the remote control everywhere. Sometimes he'd walk around shirtless, completely ignoring my existence. I tried my best to avoid them, never saying a word to him, just wanting to keep the peace. But the peace didn't last. 6 days ago, he spent the night for the first time, and then the second and the third. I knew I had to speak up. On the fourth morning, I gathered my courage and talked to Leora, telling her that Trevor staying so long wasn't right, and that his presence made me uncomfortable. What she said cut me to the core. He's my boyfriend, and this is my apartment too. I can do whatever I want, mind your own business. The next morning, I panicked when I saw Trevor's toothbrush, towel, and a pair of muddy sneakers dumped on the bathroom sink. He clearly planned to move in permanently. I pulled out the lease and pointed out the clause, guests can't stay more than 14 nights in 6 months. That conversation was the final straw. Leora dropped the pretense entirely, and I found myself in even deeper trouble. From that day on, Leora and Trevor got worse. They trashed the apartment. The kitchen sink was filled with moldy dishes, soup spilled on the floor had hardened into crust, and the trash can overflowed with rotting food, attracting flies. The bathroom floor was covered in hair and grime, the shower head was torn off and thrown in the corner, and the mirror was smudged with water spots and fingerprints. The living room carpet was littered with snack crumbs, beer cans, and cigarette butts. They even piled dirty clothes on the couch, filling the air with a disgusting stench. Every night after work, I'd spend over an hour cleaning just to be able to live normally, but they didn't feel an ounce of guilt. Instead, they ordered me around. Trevor would demand I get him drinks, and Leora would complain if I moved her stuff while cleaning. To make matters worse, Trevor would yell obscenities on the phone for hours in the living room, and sometimes he'd bring friends over to party, smoking, drinking, and shouting until the early morning, completely ignoring that I had to work the next day. Our only real fight happened one night, when I came home to find them smoking weed on the porch. Trevor was wearing nothing but loose underwear, almost naked, leaning against the railing. I couldn't stand it anymore and said, "Please put some clothes on in a public area." Trevor glared at me and yelled, "Who the hell do you think you are? You don't get to tell me what to do in this house." Leora chimed in, "Eric, stop being so dramatic. Trevor can wear whatever he wants." Leora also started spreading lies about me to our mutual friends. She'd say, "Eric's been really unstable lately, he's always snapping at me. I feel threatened and unsafe. I need Trevor here to protect me." It was complete nonsense. To avoid conflict, I'd leave right after work every day, staying at the library or gym until 11 or 12 p.m., doing everything I could to avoid them. I knew exactly what she was doing. She needed an excuse to keep Trevor around, even though the lease prohibited it. By painting me as a threat, she could justify Trevor's role as her protector. I wasn't worried that the landlord would believe her lies. I'd always paid rent on time and taken good care of the apartment, but I was terrified they'd find the whole mess too much trouble and terminate the lease. I loved this apartment, and I'd only lived there for 2 months. I didn't want to lose it over this. Desperate, I took steps to protect myself. I changed the Wi-Fi password, since I was paying for all the utilities, after all, and locked all my personal belongings, dishes, cookware, utensils, laundry detergent, fabric softener, inside my bedroom. I refused to let them use my things for free, and I didn't want any unnecessary contact with them. But even that didn't stop Trevor. He still showed up at the apartment every day, and Leora had no intention of making him leave. I felt more helpless than ever. I posted about my situation online, and soon received dozens of comments and advice. Some people told me to demand Leora split the rent evenly. After all, I was essentially supporting 2 people. Others suggested I kick her out, or even threatened to call the police. A few advised me to break the lease and find a new place, but that would cost me another $6,000, I couldn't afford it, and I didn't want to move from such a nice apartment to a rundown one. Someone also reminded me that Florida has strict rules about long-term guests, telling me to contact the landlord right away. I'd already considered most of these options. I'd emailed Leora weeks earlier asking to split the rent, attaching all the utility bills and calculating exactly how much she owed. I told her she needed to pay by the 1st of every month, but she flat out refused. Still, I kept all the records. If it came down to it, I could take her to small claims court. As for kicking her out, I'd asked her countless times, but she insisted the lease had her name on it too. The only way to get her out was if the landlord evicted her. And calling the police. Trevor was there with Leora's permission, so technically he wasn't doing anything illegal. If I called the police, it might backfire, the landlord could evict both of us. I'd already talked to the landlord, who lived next door. She was well aware that Trevor was staying long-term, and that the apartment was a mess. She'd even reminded me earlier that the 14-night rule was in place specifically to prevent this kind of situation. Days turned into weeks of torment. The atmosphere in the apartment was so tense I could barely breathe. I soon realized Trevor had Northwest other place to live. His SUV was stuffed with clothes, shoes, hangers, and other personal items, and there was a foldable mattress in the back seat. He was homeless, using Leora to mooch off me. And Leora. She'd become completely selfish, cruel, and rude, nothing like the girl I'd once known. They were stuck in this high school-like, codependent relationship, convinced the world was against them. After losing her driver's license from the DUI, Leora spent every waking minute with Trevor, abandoning the friend who'd stood by her through everything. The landlord warned Leora multiple times about the 14-night rule, but she ignored her, insisting she needed Trevor's protection. Finally, the landlord sent Leora a formal notice. If Trevor stayed past 14 nights, both of us would be evicted. Leora promised she'd make him leave, but on the 15th day, there he was, showing up at the apartment like clockwork. I'd had enough. I got into a heated argument with Leora, recording everything on my phone for my own protection. I confronted her about breaking her promise and destroying our friendship, but she just called me stingy and petty. That's when Trevor snapped. He lunged at me, grabbed me by the collar, and punched me square in the left cheek. The pain was searing, I felt blood trickling from my mouth, and my phone fell to the floor. To be honest, I'd been worried I didn't have enough evidence to call the police, but that punch changed everything. I broke free, picked up my phone, and dialed 911 immediately. The police arrived quickly. They reviewed the footage on my phone, inspected the apartment, and talked to the landlord and neighbors. Trevor was arrested for assault and battery, facing fines and jail time. Leora cried and screamed, trying to defend him, claiming I provoked him first, but the police didn't buy it, not with the video and evidence right in front of them. I went to the hospital, where I was diagnosed with a mild concussion and facial bruising. The doctor gave me a medical certificate and medication. After spending 10 days in jail, Trevor didn't dare come near the apartment again, but Leora still refused to see reason. She cried to everyone who'd listen, claiming I ruined her life. She even tried to convince the landlord to evict me instead, but the landlord had already seen her true colors and stood firmly on my side. She sent Leora another eviction notice, giving her 10 days to move out or face legal action. Leora and Trevor's fates were tragic, to say the least. With an assault conviction added to his prior record of DUI and theft, Trevor couldn't find a steady job. He was stuck doing odd jobs just to scrape by. Leora's constant drinking and erratic lifestyle took a toll on her health. She developed severe gastritis and depression. Without a stable income, she couldn't afford rent and was forced to move into a rundown basement. I later heard that Trevor owed money to loan sharks and had to flee the city, leaving Leora behind. She lost her home, her relationship, and all her friends. Now she survives on government assistance. Occasionally, I'll see her on the street, gaunt, hollow-eyed, a shadow of the person she once was. As for me, once Leora moved out, I finally got my peace back. The landlord trusted me enough to let me renew the lease on my own. I renovated the apartment, bought new furniture and curtains, and turned the space that had been destroyed into a warm, comfortable home. I got a better job with a raise, made new friends, and started spending weekends hiking, camping, and going to baseball games. My face healed, but I was left with a faint scar on my lip. Every time I touch it, I'm reminded of this experience, a warning to protect myself and be careful who I trust. It's been a year since that roommate nightmare, and I've truly settled in this city. I bought a car of my own, and I'm saving up to buy a house. I still believe in the value of friendship, but I've learned that not all friendships are worth keeping, and not everyone is worth sacrificing for. When it comes to principles and self-respect, boundaries and rules are non-negotiable. Some relationships, once corrupted by greed and selfishness, can never be fixed. This experience taught me 3 valuable lessons. First, maintaining a good relationship with your landlord is crucial. Their support can make all the difference when things go wrong. Second, Northwest, matter how close you are to a friend, always sign a separate roommate agreement before moving in. Clearly defining rights and responsibilities avoids unnecessary conflicts down the line. Third, never tolerate injustice or abuse. When you're wronged, stand up for yourself and use the law to protect your rights. Now, every night after work, I make myself a cup of tea and sit on the balcony, enjoying the quiet happiness of my own space. Those dark days are behind me, and the future looks bright. I'll carry the lessons I've learned with me, moving forward bravely to embrace whatever life has in store.